Okay, time for the postmortem on what was not a 3-point loss for the Vikings. The score, if you just looked at the score, say you overslept and you look at the score and you see 24-21, you're like, well, I'm disappointed that we lost, but at least we, had a close game. No, this was not a close game. This was a terrible, terrible performance by the Vikings. Maybe not ultimately as bad as the one from 2 weeks ago against the Falcons, but boy, this is, I don't know where we go from here. Um, this was a really, really ugly performance, and the reality is that dating back to last year, this is now the fifth time in 6 games where they've looked really, really bad for most of the game. If you want to give them, obviously, the fourth quarter against Chicago, made the comeback. Even if you want to give them a little bit of the fourth quarter today, I never felt like this was a real comeback that they were making. I did a live reaction video. I wasn't even into it because I didn't even feel like it meant anything. But this team looks really bad a lot now, and we're not anywhere close to is KOC on the hot seat. We're not anywhere close to that yet. And I don't think anyone in the organization would have him there yet. But a lot of this game and a lot of the failures of this team lately, dating back to the games at the end of last year, where we were playing for the number one seed in the NFC, and then we were playing on basically a neutral site against a decent team, but not great, and we got absolutely skull fucked in both those games. Terrible performances, and we haven't looked good this year. 2-2, but the game that looks like the outlier is that game last week, and that was fun. 48-10 over the Bengals was fun, but that's looking like an absolute fluke. This is just not. I wasn't expecting 48-10 today. Obviously, that's not going to happen. That's something that might happen once in every 5 years or something like that. But I was expecting a close game, a competitive game. Too much of this game was not competitive. I guess you want to start, where most of these things start with the quarterback. I guess the people who care more about seeing JJ McCarthy play than the Vikings winning or losing, well, they're going to be a little bit more happy because, Wentz had a very, solid, efficient performance against the Bengals, but he was never really in a position where he had to really, be the driving force. And today he was. The statistics end up looking pretty good because he ended up throwing for well over 300 yards. Both Jefferson and Addison, first game back for Addison, they both got over 100. Probably would have had an extra touchdown. You kind of look back now, 3-point game. You're like, well, Jefferson tripped on open turf, just out in the middle of the turf on a play where he might have scored a touchdown. They only got a field goal in that drive, and then I still don't understand how Addison got caught on that long, was it 81-yard pass at the end? It needed to be about 83 yards because then they would have gotten that. The whole last bit of that game changes in a big, big way if he gets in on that play, because they blew, and this we're going to get to the coaching. That tackle cost them like a minute and a half, with like already under 4 minutes left at that point. You score that touchdown on the Addison play. You're kicking deep at that point. You're kicking deep, and you might, if maybe you get the ball back, maybe the same turn of events happens and you stop them. I thought Pittsburgh was kind of chicken shit to punt there at the end, but they gave us a shot. But if you kick deep, maybe you're getting that situation much closer to a potential field goal. We know Riker can bomb them, so I knew if we got even within like a 60-yard field goal, they were going to try it, but we never got there. But Wentz, again, at the end, Wentz, he took the grounding, should have just taken the sack, but at that point, you get a sack or a grounding there, it doesn't really even matter. The game was going to end with that play. You want your veteran quarterback, even the guy who's only been here still about a month, to be, kind of a calming, steadying influence. I don't know how much Wentz can really do considering the state of the offensive line, but you know, what were we seeing a lot of, early in the game? Holding the ball too long, you know, you know, taking sacks that you don't need to take. Yeah, I think he ended up with 6. Um, but I'll give him credit for battling. I'll give him credit for making some plays at the end. In the fourth quarter to at least make it interesting. I mean, I still don't feel like this was a close loss. I feel like this was a definitive loss that the Vikings absolutely deserved. But I'll give Wentz credit for battling. I don't think it's gonna. I think we're moving even closer now to it's going to be McCarthy. In fact, if they deem McCarthy healthy, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts next week when they're in London. Um, so this was our first ever loss overseas, which if eventually it was going to happen, I mean, at this point, we would basically play one every year, at least one every year. Um, but I mean, Wentz, he had a little bit of the Nick Mullins in him today, to where he's like, he maybe can make some plays, but he's also going to throw it to the other team. I mean, obviously, the one was, that was batted like at the line. That kind of is, anytime you have a ball picked off like that, it's almost kind of fluky. But the other one was not very good, and of course, the last failed drive there, he almost got one picked off. Was pretty lucky not to have it picked off to end the game right there. Although at that point, you are just basically in desperation mode. So, I don't know. Grade for Wentz today, maybe a C plus, B minus. I don't know. It's not great. It's not the worst performance I've ever seen. We got to talk. I mean, I don't think he's like the reason they lost the game. I think, we got to go to the offensive line. Just a tattered mess. Every bit of optimism that any Vikings fan had that this was going to be, where they were finally, the additions that we had through the draft and free agency, that we were going to have an offensive line this year. I think those are just up in smoke. We knew Donovan Jackson was going to be out. He had a wrist. Was it a wrist injury? He actually had it before. It either happened during the game last week or it happened before the game last week. But they said, they kept him out there. Had the surgery. He's out for, I believe, both of these Europe games. So we knew he was going to be out. And then Brian O'Neill went out very early in the game. Did not return. Obviously, we don't know. I haven't seen any of the post-game stuff at this point, but I don't know what his status will be for the next game. So right there, you're down, you're down those two guys, and then Ryan Kelly gets another concussion, and he's had multiple concussions already this season. He's had them going back a ways. You got to start to wonder if he's even going to be able to play anymore, because it gets to a point where you can't. I mean, just to save a guy's life, you can't keep throwing him out there. So what were we reduced to? I mean, we had Darisaw out there, and we had Fries out there. And then I think Brando was playing on one side, and we had put School back out there because School is healthy. I don't know why we're not giving Walter Rouse a shot, but on some of these plays, it's hard to tell really who's getting destroyed. I mean, there were so many plays that it was just the whole Steelers front was pouring through. Which of course, I mean, just and same as it was with McCarthy, you can't always blame Wentz for what the offensive line is doing if the offensive line is playing really poorly. We have seen it many times over the years with many different quarterbacks. If the offensive line is horrible, it's going to affect the quarterback play. But now we get to I think the number one issue with this game is Kevin O'Connell, and the bloom is off the rose for him as far as I'm concerned. I've kind of felt this way for a while. Like the wins and losses overall has been very good. I think he's a very good coach as far as dealing with players. I think he's he's a coach that players will like to play for. They'll bust their ass for him. I think he's an absolutely horrible in-game tactician, and I think he absolutely has got to stop being the offensive play caller. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think he's going to give Wes Phillips the the power to call plays. I don't think he's going to do it, but he's terrible. He's absolutely terrible at play calling in games. It's like I was banging my head against the wall, metaphorically, almost literally, because you have the situation, and we've seen this going back. This isn't just necessarily a KOC issue, but we've seen it going back, you know, um, many years, with many bad offensive lines. If your offensive line is in bad condition, whether it's due to injury or just incompetence or some combination, you have to call plays to minimize that problem. O'Connell would not do that today until desperation time, basically in the fourth quarter, when he had no choice. I think the first touchdown that they got in the fourth quarter, I think that drive started with like maybe 8 or 9 minutes left, and you're down, what was that, 24-6 at the time. So you have no choice but to run quick plays, quick passes. You can't sit back and do the 5-7 step drop bullshit. You can't do all this play action. I mean, it limits your offense, but you have to call plays around what you have, and Kevin O'Connell will not do it. And I'm frankly really getting tired of this shit. He won't adapt to the reality of the situation. You know what? Maybe he went into this season thinking, oh, we're gonna have this great 5-man line. Darisaw didn't play right away. But we're going to have this great 5-man line. Well, guess what? These 5 guys are probably never going to take a single snap together. You can't, and deep into this football game, even with 60% of your offensive line down, he's still calling 5-7 step drops for Carson Wentz. There's no short game. You thought maybe with Addison coming back this week, maybe we'd finally start to see some slants, some quick hitting passes. No, I mean there's dump offs, but dump offs are not, you can't necessarily like run an offense just with dump offs. You can't run an offense that way. You have to try to minimize the issues with the offensive line, and at some point you maybe can't. But I'm sure the naysayers would be like, well, it was prevent defense in the fourth quarter. No, they looked like they were still coming after him. I mean, they were still getting pressure, but the ball was getting out quick. Some of this is on Wentz too. Like there are plays where he's holding the ball too long, just like there were plays where McCarthy was holding the ball too long. But I'm tired of this shit with KOC not every pass play is either a dump off or a 20-yard pass. I mean, Addison was back in this game. You think, okay, he's going to get some of these, we're going to actually try some slants, try some shorter throws. Look, you don't have to go far. Look at what Aaron Rodgers was doing to us in the first half of this goddamn game. That ball was out in 2 seconds because they're designing plays to get the ball out in 2 seconds. I mean, the first play of the game, Jalen Redmond just crushes Aaron Rodgers. And from that point on, it's like, okay, we're going to get that ball out fast. We're going to minimize, whether it's a great pass rush, a terrible offensive line, or some combination of both. You coach around the problems. You don't coach to KOC's coaching to ignore the problem. And this is going to be a season-long thing. We're not going to have this great offensive line that some people expected. We're not. It's just not going to happen. Whether it's injuries or ineffectiveness or whatever, we're not going to have a great offensive line this year. We're going to have at best a mediocre offensive line again. Meanwhile, we've got guys who we discarded who are doing pretty good with other teams so far. So, there's been talk that maybe the line coach needs to go or something, but I don't want to hear injuries as an excuse. Like you still got a superb left tackle out there. You still got a highly paid guard. You still got veterans who you brought in because you think they can play in it if needed. And if they can't, then you have to coach around it. And maybe if this offense had shown up maybe if KOC had not called idiot plays for 3 quarters that made things worse, maybe the outcome of this game ends up different. I don't expect KOC to give up play calling. I don't expect him to give up play calling to Wes Phillips, but it's looking, the wins and losses, have been very good. But he hasn't won a playoff game. He doesn't have infinite leash. And if the season goes real south, yeah, his seat's warm. And the GM seat's warm too. Because, he's much ballyhooed spending a lot of money on the in the trenches. Defensive line doesn't have the excuse. Run game was terrible today. Couldn't tackle, giving up big yards to Gainwell. Redmond got to Rodgers a couple times. Other than that, they really didn't put any pressure on him. But part of that is Pittsburgh's calling plays to minimize the pressure. Badly outcoached today. That's what the Vikings were. It really was really, really bad. And this is becoming a trend. How bad must the Bengals be to have let last week happen? Because, really, no team is really ever 48-10 better than any other one. Those kinds of games are always flukes. But, again, this team has looked very bad. 5 of the last 6 times they've taken the field in a real game. And, another big issue is the penalties. And we had a lot of I didn't look to see exactly how many penalties we had today. We didn't have, I think last week we had 13. We didn't have 13, but we had some very stupid penalties, undisciplined. We had a fucking delay of game, on that last series. At the end of the game, there was a terrible personal foul on, I think it was Turner, kind of late in the game. Very like a stupid block in the back on a punt return that wasn't even like a good block. A couple more, issues with holding and stuff. Like, this is a very undisciplined football team, and that's a week after week problem. Now, too, that shit comes back on the coaching. Why are the penalties happening? Are they not being, coached properly? Are they not being put in the right spots? Hold on one second. Okay, we're back. Interruptions, man. Life. So yeah, I forget where I left off now. Yeah, I just think that it's piling up now. Where how often watch a Vikings game and come out of it thinking KOC got his ass handed to him, and he did. And this is just because I don't know what the solution is going to be here, but you go back to McCarthy. The offensive line isn't going to somehow just instantly get better with McCarthy. You got to coach around problems, just like you got to coach to your strengths. You got to coach around your weaknesses. I've said this many times. I've said this pre-KOC era. You have to do it. Sometimes it's like I think there's like a level of arrogance with some of these coaches these days. I think KOC thinks he's, man, I like KOC. I like him. I'm not anti-KOC. I feel like he's got a touch of arrogance to him, where he thinks he's an offensive genius, and he ain't. We saw it again. What was going on there after the long Addison play? We get a 1st and goal at the 1 or 2 yard line, and we can't get a fucking yard or two to punch it in. We're burning clock. That's on coaching. Yeah, snap the ball quicker or whatever, but KOC doesn't have any ability to do the short yardage plays either. Like that's been obviously an issue going back as long as he's been the head coach. It's like you get the short yardage plays, and we suck at them all the time. And of course that cost us time. I mean, maybe the game ends at the end of the game. Maybe it plays out a little differently if we're scoring that touchdown with 3.5 minutes to go instead of barely 2 minutes. Maybe we get the ball back with more time. Maybe we're not hurrying. It's this stuff that just adds up. I'm not happy with the defense either. I mean, anytime you get a burn for like an 80-yard touchdown, that's a defensive breakdown. But and obviously like the overall, the points allowed, they gave up 24. Could have easily been more. We had a blocked field goal. Isaiah Rodgers, well, he made it some impact this week. He blocked a field goal, and then that where they went for the up 24-14, where they went for a fourth down inside the 5 instead of kicking a field goal. And we did stop them there, but I think some of that was just like the last drive before our failed comeback. I think that was more like maybe Pittsburgh kind of screwing up themselves. I don't know, like Pittsburgh's not great. Pittsburgh's an okay team. But, they might be in the mix for the playoffs, but they're not a great team. But it's frustrating as hell, man. We're 2-2. Could be worse. I mean, ultimately, the way they've played the majority of 3 of these 4 games, they're lucky to have 2 wins. It's just frustrating as hell because now the game next week, you're going to London, and they're staying out there, I think, overseas. You're going to be playing the Browns in London. I mean, the Browns are not good, but they did beat the Packers. They do have an okay defense. They do have Myles Garrett. And I know they're playing Detroit today. I don't know what the score is yet. I assume Detroit's going to win that game pretty easily, but it's not going to be easy. And nothing is going to come easy if your offensive line is like this, if your quarterback play is shaky, and your coach is doing nothing to improve the situation. Because then you get the bye, and then out of that bye, it's a really tough schedule for at least the next 4 weeks. And even after that, you've got tough games. You still got 2 games against the Packers. You got you have a Seattle game in there. Seattle's been pretty good so far this year. So it's like, I don't think this season is like, on the verge of spiraling into like some like 3-4 win disaster. Like, I think this is a team that's going to at least be, in the mix for the playoffs late in the season, but things can get better. But it's a trend now that this team does not look good. They don't look disciplined. They don't look like they're well coached. Again, I think KOC is good with players. I don't think he's good as an in-game coach. And we're in year 4 of KOC, and he's still having a lot of these same issues in these games. And it's like, okay, well, assume your offensive line is not going to be intact the way you expect it to be for the season. What's your plan? I don't know if KOC has a plan. I think when you're kind of blowing a team out, getting a bunch of turnovers like last week, I think it's easy. I think it's easy to look like a great coach, but and this is an unfair thing, but it's like, it's not like the Rams have really lost a beat too much since KOC left. It's not like, I think, just because a guy was on the staff with the Rams doesn't mean he's Sean McVay. Sean McVay could end up being a Hall of Fame coach. He's still got the Rams very good. I believe they're, they lost last week, but they almost beat the Eagles in Philly. I mean, they're a very good team, playoff team the last couple of years. Like, they had like one down year, but they've kept at it, and and we've won a lot of games too, but we haven't won in the playoffs. And this sure as shit does not look like, through 4 games, like a team that's going to break the playoff drought. We haven't won a playoff game since 2019. It does not look like this is going to be the season to do that. And it's really, really, really frustrating. And the injuries just pile up. I know we obviously we had a couple. We had Van Ginkel out today. I think Grenard got banged up at one point. He was out. Defense hasn't had the injury bug as much as the offense, but injuries are going to happen. There are teams that are destroyed by injuries, but they fight through it. This is dangerously close to looking like another season where the Vikings get some injuries and they just can't figure it out. And the Vikings did not deserve to win this game today the way they played, but this should have been a win. A neutral site against Pittsburgh, that should be a win. Just like a neutral site against Cleveland next week should be a win. You can't kick away these games because there's no guarantee they're going to win any of those games out of the bye. Was it Philly, Chargers, Detroit, Baltimore? There's no guarantee they're going to win any of those games. You lose all those games, even if you win next week, boom, then you're what, 3-6, and you're just desperate to maybe sneak into playoff contention. Maybe things will flip around. Obviously nobody expected 48-10 last week. But those are not those that look like the outlier. That looks like a fluke game. Because this they came into the season, again, even going back to the McCarthy stuff, they came into the season expecting to really compete. It wasn't like we're tanking this season just to get J.J. McCarthy some experience. No, they came into the season with a roster that they thought could win. With McCarthy, even with McCarthy having the stumbles. And if they didn't think McCarthy was ready, well, maybe they should have signed Aaron Rodgers. I don't think Aaron Rodgers was great today by any stretch. I hate that this could be the last time we ever face Aaron Rodgers and we lost to him. But he wasn't great. He most of his yardage was on the run after catch by Metcalf. He didn't do much, But the Steelers were far better coached today, and they coached to what Rodgers can do. And Vikings got him on the ground right away. They started coaching around that. We don't coach around it because I think we got a coach who kind of thinks he's a lot smarter than he maybe is. So anyway, I've been going almost 30 minutes. Very disappointing. Worst part is you lose these fucking early games. 8:30 a.m. start. Got to sit with it all day. It's the first time we've had this. Every other time we've had to win these games, we've won it. So you get to enjoy the positive vibes for the whole day. This is the first time we've had to have to face the other side. But hopefully we get some good news on some of these linemen. I know Jackson, I think, is a 2-week thing, so he's not going to be back till after the bye. But hopefully O'Neill's back. Hopefully we can get some other guys back and stop having further injuries. There's not much you can do to prevent injuries, but we've seen it so many times with the Vikings, just in the last decade or so, where injuries just decimate a season. And I hope that's not going to end up being one of the top stories from this season. But no matter what happens, it's on KOC to stop making the situation worse. I think he's making the situation worse with how he handles some of these situations. And whether it's Carson Wentz or J.J. McCarthy or Max Brosmer, KOC has got to improve, and he's got to get better at what he does as far as calling plays to play to the strengths of the team and minimize the problems. Because if he doesn't, this thing could spiral into being a very bad season.